This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Susie Guerin. Brought to you in part by
TheStreet.com, featuring Herb Greenberg, who reminds investors that risk is real. With Herb Greenberg's Reality Check, researching stocks in terms of risk. You can learn more at TheStreet.com/realitycheck.
No deal. AstraZeneca rejects Pfizer's sweetened and final offer for the British drug maker, leaving many investors wondering what Pfizer will do next.
From no deal to a done deal, AT&T acquires DirecTV in a merger that could redefine the industry and the shape of the future of television.
And charged with cyber spying. For the first time ever, the U.S. has accused Chinese military members of conducting economic cyber crimes against American companies. Which firms were hacked and why were they targeted? We have all that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Monday, May 19th.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Modest gains in stocks today, but that's not what people on Wall Street were buzzing about. Much of the talk was about two members of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, both household names, both pillars of the U.S. and global economies, and both involved in massive multi-billion dollars that could transform their business models and industries. But only one of those companies appears to have a deal. The other, no deal. And that's where we start tonight. After months of negotiations and multiple sweetened offers, Pfizer received a firm no from Britain's AstraZeneca, which said Pfizer's latest and supposedly final offer of $119 billion to create the world's biggest pharmaceutical company still wasn't enough. So no deal. But some pretty big questions remain about what's next for Pfizer and AstraZeneca. Take it or leave it, and AstraZeneca left it, rejecting Pfizer's sweetened and, it says, final offer to buy the British drug maker because the $119 billion price tag just wasn't enough.
We decided to tell Pfizer that at $53.50 they needed to put more than 10% plus on the table to get into recommendation discussions. So that was on the request from our shareholders, and that's what we did.
But the brush-off is leaving Pfizer with an uncertain future, as its plan to create the world's biggest drug company hits a major roadblock. Despite the setback, Pfizer has one more week to make another offer for AstraZeneca, a deadline established under British law. Pfizer says it won't, but it does give AstraZeneca shareholders time to turn up the heat on the board and pressure it to continue talks. Pfizer also has the option to go hostile, which means taking the issue directly to shareholders over the head of the board, but it says it doesn't want to. The chance of the deal completely collapsing is real, and if that does happen, Pfizer will be left with a ton of cash to put to work.
If they didn't necessarily want to repatriate the cash, they could also raise debt and buy back shares and use the cash overseas to balance off some of that debt.
And the outcome of this deal could leave a lasting effect on other American drug companies looking to do overseas deals that would lower their tax rates.
Closing the loopholes on being able to do the tax inversion for these mergers would likely mean that there will be a bit of a flurry of trying to get these deals done sooner rather than later.
Without a deal, both companies may find themselves searching for big fixes because each has seen sales drop, and as patents expire, they're facing more and more competition from generic drug makers. And here's a look at how both drug makers performed today. Pfizer shares rose 0.5%, but AstraZeneca down 12%.
Now, the other Dow component involved in a massive acquisition today, AT&T. It reached a deal to buy DirecTV for nearly $50 billion. It's the latest merger in the telecom and television industries, changing the landscape on how consumers receive their TV shows, data, and wireless services. Morgan Brennan has more on which companies may be in play for future mergers.
We've known it was coming, but this weekend, AT&T and DirecTV officially struck a deal, marking the latest big-ticket purchase in the communications space. The deal, which still has to get past regulators, will create a combined company with access to over 26 million U.S. pay TV subscribers, putting it up against another emerging industry behemoth, Comcast. which will have 30 million subscribers if its own merger with Time Warner Cable is approved. AT&T and DirecTV's deal accelerates an emerging trend in media: consolidation. Analysts say the entire industry is undergoing a fundamental shift as customers increasingly go online for their media consumption.
This is all about broadband. You know, we're living in a broadband world. When you talk about the Time Warner Comcast transaction, no one is talking about how many video households they have and how much better video service they can offer. It's all about what is the potential of broadband in this country, and then what can that bigger company do in terms of getting into a Wi-Fi footprint to provide wireless access to that broadband.
AT&T will be able to more rapidly build out its video services, while DirecTV would access the telecom's broadband infrastructure. That raises questions about Dish Network, which doesn't have the internet capabilities to compete, but does have the wireless airwaves that telecom companies might want. Today's news is already fueling reports that Dish could be in talks with Verizon, a move that could, if realized, spur yet another deal. AT&T's announcement also raises questions about regulators and whether two major mergers will slow down the review process and possibly impede yet another acquisition, Sprint's interest in T-Mobile US.
I think it's a good time to get deals through the regulators, as there's going to be very little pushback, and clearly they've been supporting consolidation. So I think this deal is going to dictate the way a lot of other deals play out in this space.
But one thing is certain: as consumers increasingly turn to the internet to stream video, media companies are seeking ways to build out their video services and the infrastructure to distribute them. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Morgan Brennan in Los Angeles.
And Rich Peterson joins us now to talk more about today's episode of Deal or No Deal. He's director of S&P Capital IQ. Rich, welcome. Good to have you with us in studio tonight. Let's talk first about the Pfizer deal. This one looks like it may not take place, but I'm wondering what your spidey sense is. Do you think this is a tactical retreat?
Well, the key word there is final. What does final mean?
What does final mean?
What does final mean? You know, according to the takeover panel in the UK, the final proposal is the final proposal. But that's the key word. Is it a proposal or an offer? So the lawyers are going to hash that out in the next few days.
If it turns out that it is the final, and they go away, they go their separate ways, what does Pfizer do now?
Well, they have a couple of options. Obviously, they have to wait 6 months before they come back for another proposal. But then you also have some very disgruntled shareholders, many of which are big institutions. Number one being BlackRock. BlackRock is the biggest shareholder of Pfizer's or AstraZeneca shares, owning about 8%. So they're probably very disgruntled with the fact that the shares have dropped 8% today.
But do you think that Pfizer has decided not to go, if they decide not to go hostile, is it because it's just harder to do, it takes too long, and that they're under this time pressure that they have to do a deal with somebody as soon as possible?
Well, I think the question is, hostile deals by their nature are very difficult to consummate.
Right.
I think our data over at S&P Capital IQ shows only about a 20-25% success rate for a hostile deal. You really need the board on board, so to speak. The fact is, they wanted to do this deal in part to do the corporate inversion, to try to take advantage of the lower tax rates that the UK offered. Now, other firms have done that. Activists acquired Warner Chilcott a couple of years ago, and we see that also happening in the manufacturing side. So I think it's up to the management of Pfizer to make the determination how soon, will they make a decision, either go hostile or seek shareholders to come on board.
Let's talk about the ATT and DirecTV deal. In the piece there that Morgan sent, Verizon now, ball in your court. Are they likely to go after Dish, which has been sort of in play at various times over the past few years?
Well, as we were talking a little bit off air, it's kind of funny now we're talking about AT&T 30 years after the baby bells were broken up. Now here AT&T is coming back into
It's like Godzilla returning every few years.
Bigger is better? Is that the case here? Bigger is better? You have to have scale?
You're talking about Verizon. I think the difficulty is there. Last year they acquired the stake in Verizon Wireless for $130 billion. Vodafone deal from that Vodafone owned. So they're trying to put that into under their umbrella. I think with Dish Network, you talk about a chessboard where there are only so many pieces left on the board. The fact with Dish, you talk about Verizon, but I don't think that could be happening. Then it's talking about SoftBank or Sprint, which is owned by Japan's SoftBank, or T-Mobile, which is owned by Deutsche Telekom, both international players that parents may not be too apt to look for that deal.
You know, a lot of people are saying whatever happens with Verizon and what they do next, that the next wave of mergers will be like with the networks, CBS, maybe Fox, maybe Netflix. Do you see it that way?
Well, I think one factor may come towards private equity. You know, we're talking about who's the other players. You know, private equity is something on the order of $300 billion of dry powder, unused capital to put to work. Now, that's the nature of private equity is not to be active in the media sector per se. Most of their deals are either consumer discretionary, some energy this year. But that could be interesting. Take a look at that.
Rich Peterson, thanks very much. Great to see you.
My
Rich
pleasure.
Peterson's with S&P Capital IQ.
On Wall Street today, those headline-grabbing mergers that we just told you about gave stocks a modest boost, enough to lift the Dow Transportation Index to a fresh all-time high. The Dow added 20 points. The Nasdaq was up 35, thanks to gains in internet and biotech stocks, and the S&P was up 7 points.
Apple and Google have called a truce, at least for today, and at least on one issue, the two tech titans have agreed to drop multiple patent infringement lawsuits they filed against each other. Apple has called Google's Android operating system a copy of its iPhone system, while Google's Motorola Mobility unit has filed a series of lawsuits against Apple for stealing its mobile patents. Now, the truce does not apply to Apple's ongoing and long-standing litigation against Samsung over illegal patent use.
Now, another Google division is making news today. Google's YouTube unit is reportedly paying $1 billion in cash to acquire Twitch. It's a video game streaming service. But what exactly is Twitch? Who uses it? And why is it worth all that money? Josh Lipton explains.
That was exciting, but not exciting.
Most people couldn't answer this question. What's the most popular video channel on Google's YouTube? The answer is Twitch. Twitch is best known for streaming live video game tournaments, where gamers can watch others play. And this is a big market. As many as 1 million people sometimes watch these tournaments, which can last up to 10 hours. And that's exactly why Google is now reportedly thinking of spending $1 billion to buy Twitch.
Google obviously is interested in broadening its reach and broadening the reach of YouTube. Twitch, I know, is the largest YouTube channel. So more activity on YouTube is on Twitch than any other channel.
It's within striking distance here.
Twitch hasn't been around long, but it now boasts 45 million unique visitors per month, and it's raised about $35 million from investors including Take-Two Interactive and Bessemer Venture Partners. Twitch is one of the hottest video web services in the world, and part of that is due to the loyalty and focus of the global video gaming community, which loves its live streaming entertainment.
PS4 and Xbox One having Twitch integrated, I mean, Sony, there's literally a button on the controller that you press and you start broadcasting. So, the idea that, people can watch your game session, and as these, each of these console makers sells tens of millions of consoles, we forecast that each of them is going to sell 100 million or more consoles. You're suddenly going to have 200 million people with the ability to broadcast via Twitch anytime they feel like it.
And at the end of the day, for Google, it's all about building a massive and loyal audience. If the internet giant can monetize Twitch's huge fan base, Google believes that could be a license to print money. Josh Lipton, Nightly Business Report.
Still ahead on the program, the U.S. accuses some members of the Chinese military of cyber spying on American companies. Which companies? And why were they targeted? Credit Suisse is coming clean, agreeing to plead guilty to tax evasion charges. The guilty plea is part of a settlement with the U.S. Justice Department over allegations that it helped wealthy American clients hide money in secret Swiss bank accounts in order to avoid paying U.S. taxes.
The Justice Department has come out swinging against corporate espionage, accusing 5 Chinese military officials of cyber spying on 6 American companies. The indictments announced today include 31 counts of economic espionage, theft of trade secrets, and aggravated identity theft. The targeted companies are Westinghouse, Alcoa, U.S. Steel, SolarWorld, Allegheny Technologies, and the United Steelworkers Union. At a press event today, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder said international business success should not be based on a government's ability to spy and steal business secrets, and that violators will be prosecuted.
This administration will not tolerate actions by any nation that seeks to illegally sabotage American companies and undermine the integrity of fair competition in the operation of the free market.
In response, China denies the charges, calling them ungrounded and absurd, and adds that the indictments will only harm U.S.-China relations. Scott Cohen has been following today's cyber spying charges, and he joins us now. Scott, this all sounds great, but these guys are in China.
Right, they are.
They're not going to come here and subject themselves to the U.S. legal process. So what's the point of the indictment?
The point is largely symbolic, but it's more than that because they've laid out what the U.S. knows now. They've basically put the Chinese on notice, experts are telling us. And while it could send the Chinese further underground, the idea is to basically call them out, to say, here's what we've got. We know what you're doing. Now stop it.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that's kind of interesting is the industries that they targeted. So it's Alcoa, Westinghouse, what was the other one? U.S. Steel. I mean, why are they going after these steel and also some nuclear power companies?
Well, these are areas where the Chinese have been trying to gain a competitive advantage, and in some cases, according to this indictment, they did just that by basically finding out what the U.S. companies were up to. It was either U.S. companies that were pursuing unfair trade allegations against the Chinese, or were working on joint ventures with the Chinese. And in the case of the United Steelworkers, they were in the process of ramping up their campaign, sort of their PR campaign against the Chinese for unfair trade practices. Basically, it gave the Chinese, allegedly, a window into what all these people were doing so that they could gain back the advantage.
Several of these companies, with the exception of the solar company, Pittsburgh area companies, is that coincidence, or is that because there was a particularly active investigator working in that office?
Well, that's part of it, but it's also because the steel industry is there, and one of the issues that China has had in aggressively competing against the U.S. on steel is that China doesn't compete well on cost, apparently, according to analysts that we've spoken to, unless it can find out basically the other side's hand, see what the U.S. companies are doing.
Sophisticated operation?
Well, sophisticated in that allegedly it was the Chinese military, but the way that they were getting in is decidedly unsophisticated, what they call spear phishing. That's where they send an email that looks like it's legit, but it has a link or an attachment. The unsuspecting party clicks on that installs malware on their computer, and the Chinese are in.
All right, Scott Cohen, thank you very much.
Now, even with those cyber spying allegations, U.S. officials are busy trying to secure billions in Chinese investment dollars to repair the U.S.'s crumbling infrastructure. But despite the efforts, it may not be easy. Eunice Yoon has more.
As one of his first acts as the new U.S. ambassador to China, Max Baucus is building up a plan to rebuild America's infrastructure.
The United States is more than open for business. We would like foreign investment, in this case, especially Chinese investment.
This day in Beijing, the former senator from Montana is wooing Chinese investors and matching them with officials from California, Texas, Arkansas, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C.
America really needs to repair its infrastructure. Our roads and highways, bridges, airports, and so forth need repair and need to be rebuilt in many cases. We know that. Frankly, that means there's a huge opportunity.
Baucus's push is part of President Obama's efforts to ramp up the nation's infrastructure for long-term economic growth. Because of concerns about rising deficits, that spending has been limited. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce believes private money, including from China, can fill the gap. It estimates America needs at least $8 trillion to modernize transportation, energy, and water systems through 2030, the biggest upgrade, it says, since the 1950s.
Given our projections of massive U.S. infrastructure needs, China's importance as a source of global capital and infrastructure goods and services, and the mutual advantages to be realized, substantial opportunities should develop.
The U.S.'s push comes as Chinese companies are looking to diversify their investments and when Beijing is encouraging its own builders to pursue their ambitions and compete on a global stage.
But many companies here say they feel unwelcome. Relations between the U.S. and China are tense over foreign policy, cyber spying, and trade. Some Chinese firms fear their investments would face unfairly tough scrutiny in the name of national security in an industry that's seen as sensitive. Baucus, a longtime Washington power broker, though, remains upbeat.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
For Nightly Business Report, I'm Eunice Yoon in Beijing.
Urban Outfitters' profit tumbled 20% last quarter, and that is where we begin tonight's market focus. The teen retailer and parent company of Free People and Anthropologie reported higher expenses that overshadowed a rise in revenue, but sales at the namesake brand continued to decline. Shares were lower after the close. During the regular session, the stock was off only slightly at $36.17. Shares of Intermune jumped on positive drug test data. The company said that its experimental medicine to treat a fatal lung disorder had positive results in a late-stage trial. The drug maker will resubmit the treatment for approval now in the U.S. The stock up almost 13.5% to finish at $38.92. And Campbell's Soup posted weaker than expected quarterly sales as increased promotions failed to drive growth in the soup unit. The company also lowered its full-year earnings guidance, and that outlook disappointed investors. The shares fell more than 2% to $44.06.
Going to the happiest place on earth just got a little bit more expensive. Disney raised the price of a Disneyland single-day California Park Pass by $4 to $96. The cost of parking and annual passes are up as well. Shares of Disney rose a fraction to $81.05. Deutsche Bank revealed plans to raise $11 billion in new capital from investors and the royal family of Qatar in an effort to strengthen its balance sheet. The move comes amid uncertainty about the cost of regulations and the need for funds to expand its investment banking business. Shares fell more than 1% to $41.66.
GoPro, the company behind the wearable action cameras, has filed now to go public. According to papers submitted to regulators late today, the company plans to raise up to $100 million in an initial public offering of common stock. It will trade on the NASDAQ.
The board at Target stores is drawing line on executive pay. The company is revamping compensation plans for current execs and cutting last year's pay for ousted CEO Greg Steinhoffel by more than a third after shareholder complaints that he was making way too much, especially after mishandling that massive credit card data breach.
And the cola wars are apparently heating up again. Pepsi just unveiled a new high-tech soda dispensing machine. It's called Spire. It takes direct aim at Coke's Freestyle beverage fountain that lets people make their own custom blend sodas. PepsiCo's CEO Indra Nooyi says the Spire will help expand its beverage business into the restaurants, movie theaters, and other food and drink retailers.
What we can do with this is drive more top-line growth because we get more food service accounts. But within a food service account, we can drive incidents, so we can get more beverage sales. So it's going to be a big win-win.
Now, Pepsi has a lot of catching up to do. Coke's Freestyle machines have already been out for 4 years, with 20,000 of them already in the marketplace. And coming up, what happens when some of the smartest high school students in the country get asked complicated economics questions? The answer is just ahead.
Former Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke says there's no need for the central bank to shrink its balance sheet when rates finally start rising. Bernanke told a monetary policy conference in Dallas that when the time comes for the Fed to finally raise interest rates, there's no need for the Fed to reduce its $4 trillion balance sheet in order to normalize U.S. monetary policy. The former Fed head added that raising rates means the economy is getting back to normal.
Well, it may have been a long time ago, but even Ben Bernanke was once a high school student just learning about economic policy. Now, there's the annual National Economics Challenge, bringing thousands of teens across the country to compete over their knowledge of the economy and how it works. Steve Leisman, who knows a little bit about that, has more on today's finals in the 14th annual competition.
Under what conditions is it difficult for monetary policy to have an effect on...
Larry, you have 5 seconds and may not confer.
Liquidity trap?
That is correct.
Take a bunch of ridiculously smart high school students from Carmel, Indiana.
My name is Christine Wang, and I like to fold origami.
Put them up against a group of highly intelligent kids from Bel Air, Texas.
My name is Patrick Sheriday, and I really like playing Guitar Hero.
Ask them a bunch of excessively complicated economic questions, and what do you get? The National Economic Challenge. Teams from all over the country, as far away as Hawaii, Indiana, Alabama, and its closest, right here in New York, competed for these trophies. Think of it as the spelling bee for economics. Can you spell Ricardian equivalence? It's all put on by the not-for-profit Council for Economic Education. They teach teachers how to teach economics to kids.
They learn about pricing, about immigration, about the Federal Reserve System, all of the things that they will need to learn and know to understand how the economy around them is working. Plus, they actually have a lot of fun.
Carmel took a commanding lead on this question. What type of good or resource has the traits of being non-excludable and rival?
Common resources.
That is correct.
But Bel Air came back to tie it.
And once again, we are tied with one question remaining. It is 11-11.
And eventually win on this question. Of the components of GDP, which is the most important for long-run economic growth? Wait, before we tell you the answer, do you know it at home? You have 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1.
Investment. That is correct.
Congratulations, Bel Air. You are the national champions.
And the prize? Not a trip to Disney World, but something that might have been better for these kids. Ringing the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange on Wall Street. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Steve Leisman.
I got none of them right. None of them. Not
Get
a
those
one.
kids to come over here.
Yeah, we got to get them, hire them as researchers. They're set.
That's Nightly Business Report for tonight. They'll do better than that, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I'm Susie Garrett. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Tyler Matheson, an economic dunce. Have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow night.
I'm Susie Garrett with a Nightly Business Report news brief. AT&T will pay nearly $50 billion to acquire satellite giant DirecTV. It creates the nation's second-largest TV provider if approved. But Britain's AstraZeneca turned down the latest and final buyout offer of $119 billion from Pfizer. On Wall Street today, those headline-grabbing mergers gave stocks a modest boost. The Dow added 20 points. The Nasdaq was up 35, thanks to gains in internet and biotech stocks, and the S&P rose 7 points. The Justice Department accused 5 members of the Chinese military of cyber spying on 6 American companies. China denies the allegations. And Credit Suisse will plead guilty to charges of helping wealthy U.S. clients hide money in secret accounts to avoid paying U.S. taxes. Be sure to join Nightly Business Report right here on your public television station.